their idea was the way for the one church, not to set up multiple different ones. In the year 1521, Luther was officially excommunicated at the Edict of Worms, and as were all of his followers. The divides centered over the doctrine of justification, and that's one of the big decrees that comes out of the early sessions of the Council of Trent. So, if this is happening in 1521, we have a Holy Roman Emperor, and the emperor is responsible for maintaining the religious orthodoxy within his territory. Why wasn't something done? I mean, you just one Augustinian monk who is causing trouble by these new things he's writing. Why wasn't something quickly done? And this is kind of, I think, shines the light on the decreasing importance of faith within the individual lives of the monarchs in the 16th century. Worldly power and wealth I mean, you can see it in the Middle Ages. There are different times, different prelates, but there's still that overall high level of importance of faith. And as we get more and more to the modern period, that kind of declines, and worldly success and power starts becoming more important in the lives of more and more of them. In 1519, so when the Holy Roman Emperor died, the Habsburg King of Spain, Carlos V, was elected to be the Holy Roman Emperor. And he would be, for almost 40 years, the Holy Roman Emperor. And by doing so, he was in possession or control of Spain, of parts of Italy, what's now the Netherlands, Belgium, Austria, all territory all throughout Europe. And the King of France was very concerned that his power had been eclipsed and it was about time to get even. There was an ongoing disputes of wars within Italy itself, Italian politics, again, a cause for the problems. And so Francis I, the King of France, started or instigated repeatedly wars against Charles I. In Italy itself, and he got the Pope to back him on some of these. So instead of the emperor being able to address this religious revolution in his own backyard, which quickly went from just being Luther and his followers to much more radical elements, Anabaptist, and then several years later Calvin. So things spreading on that level. That his attention was concentrated on these wars with the King of France. And when the King of France got captured, then he worked out a deal with the Sultan in Turkey to attack Carlos from the side. So the complete distraction. It was not Carlos never had his hands free, or Charles never had his hands free to really address the situation, and the fact that there was much resentment among some of the princes in Germany over the whole matter, and the fact that the Pope Clement VII had turned on the emperor. The emperor finally said, "Fine," and then lifted his hands and let the Lutheran army, who was under his command, sack Rome, one of the worst sacks in its history. And so that was the last time Clement VII opposed Emperor Charles. But as you look up there at some of the dates, that these wars between the King of France and the Habsburg, or Charles I, happened repeatedly during these, so 1521 to 26, 1536 to 38, 1542 to 46, and 1551 to 59. Almost, so it's nearly a 40-year period, and over half that time being at war with one another, not over matters of religion, but over matters of power, who's going to have control in Italy. And because of that, Lutheranism quickly spread to various places throughout Germany and in Scandinavia, beginning in 1523. There is also the Reformers, or Protestant instigators in Switzerland, Zwingli, famous for his whitewashing. So if you look around some of the, I call some of the destroyed churches neo-Zwinglian. You just whitewash everything, get rid of all images. And then much more influential, that of John Calvin, throughout much of France, Switzerland, Scotland, and elsewhere. A final figure is that of Henry VIII. So we saw how Henry VIII, last time at the council, writing to the council of Fifth Lateran Council, basically condemned the King of France for what he was doing of trying to cause a schism. But to obtain an annulment himself from Catherine of Aragon, now notice she is a relative of Emperor Charles I, so Henry declared himself to be the supreme head of the Church of England in 1534. And then between 1536 and 1541, he dissolved all of England's many monasteries and distributed the land to his influential supporters. And similar things happened in the lands that the Lutherans started to control and the Calvinists. The church, either through the archbishop or the bishop himself, the lands attached to the various parishes and cathedrals, or the monasteries, religious orders. When you had that religious shift over, well, then that was all fair game to be spoils to be gathered and distributed, and so very tempting to those who were not that attached to religious orthodoxy. Doctrinally, Henry VIII was authority was one thing. Doctrinally, he did not get too far afield, but his son Edward VI and his daughter, by his a second attempted marriage, Elizabeth I, is when that doctrinally the Church of England solidifies. So Luther had appealed from the Pope to a general council because he was convinced that he would be condemned at Rome for his heretical doctrine. And the Diet held at Nuremberg in 1523 demanded a free Christian council on German soil. So while these wars are going on with the King of France, there are attempts in Germany to try to work out some type of council where these issues can be raised and discussed and so. Emperor Charles I, or King Charles V, forbade the National Council, but notified Pope Clement VII through his ambassador that he considered the calling of a general council expedient and proposed the city of Trent as the place of assembly. So notice it's still going to be over 2 decades before this happens. Francis I of France sought to frustrate the convoking of the council by making impossible conditions, and it was mainly his fault that the council was not held during the reign of Clement VII. For on the 28th of November 1531, it had been unanimously agreed in a consistory that a council should be called. So it wasn't until his successor, and many years into his successor's papacy, that the council was actually able to come together. That was Pope Paul III. But even though he was strongly in favor of a council, it was very difficult for him to get both the emperor and the King of France to agree on this. And then before too long, King Henry VIII had already split and got his own way. So the council was not able to be called until November of 1545. So nearly 30 years after Martin Luther. So almost a generation and a half has grown up and lived before anything's able to be done. So you can see how very quickly things harden because of that. And if this map kind of gives a sense of how religious affiliation, Christian affiliation within Europe had changed by the time of